In the summer of 2025, a concrete pump truck backs up to a hole in a field in northern New Jersey. The operator has a work order in his cab, and the work order says, "Fill drainage void, 43 feet, no rebar." He has not been told what the void is. He has not been told that 11 months of a man's life went into digging it, or that 4 men came out of it on a Thursday morning in March of 2019, or that the last time anybody with a badge stood where he is standing, there were 1,000 of them. He runs the pump for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Then he signs the sheet, and the tunnel under Millwood stops existing. 4 men came out of that hole. You know one of them. Marcus Boyd is doing the rest of his life in a federal cell. Tommy Serrano died in Ohio in a stolen car before the search even had a name. And Wesley Grant, the man they called Doc, walked away from all of it, reached a coastline the American government cannot touch, and became the most wanted fugitive in the country in the process. That is 3. There was a 4th man in that tunnel. There is no manhunt for him. No sighting, no photograph, no file. Not because nobody could find him, because nobody was ever looking. Everything you have been told about the man on that coastline is wrong, and the person who made sure of it has been working for the federal government since 3 weeks after he came out of the ground. 6 o'clock in the morning, the 7th of March, 2019. A corrections lieutenant standing at the edge of a wood line 200 yards outside the fence looks down at the ground and sees the only piece of evidence anybody will ever agree on. 4 sets of footprints, leaving in 4 directions. That detail is in the first report filed that morning, and it is never mentioned again, because within 9 hours the search has a face on it, and the face is Doc's. He was the oldest. He was the one who dug it. He was the one with the sentence long enough to explain it. Every list, every briefing, every press conference for the next 47 days is organized around him, and for the most part, that instinct was correct. Here is how the other 3 ended. Marcus Boyd is taken on day 21, in a motel parking lot, sitting in a car he had not started in 2 days. Original 12 years, plus 18 months for the escape, plus 15 more. He dies inside. Tommy Serrano dies the same week in Ohio, in a car that was not his. And on day 22, Levi Adler, 22 years old, goes into Lake Champlain in 42-degree water and does not come out. They drag that lake for 11 days. No body, no phone, no card, no photograph. Nothing, ever, in 7 years. And in 7 years, the Bureau has never once been willing to write the word deceased beside his name. Everybody who read that file assumed it was caution. It was not caution, it was accuracy. Doc did everything right. 19 days in a motel in Amarillo, paying cash, leaving the room twice. A beige Toyota bought from a private seller for $2,200. On day 38, he crosses at Naco, Sonora, walking, with a guide named Beto, who was paid $2,000 and is shot dead 4 days later. On the 26th of April, a commercial trawler leaves Veracruz 4 days after the Bureau quietly downgrades a manhunt to an investigation. 3 weeks after that, the same trawler is logged into Puerto Cabello, Venezuela, on a coastline the United States has had no reach into since the 90s. He made it. A 56-year-old man with no passport and no help crossed 2 borders and an ocean and beat 1,000 federal agents. And on the 9th of October, 2019, 7 months after he came out of that tunnel, he died in a rented room above a marina in a town of 4,000 people, and not one person on earth who was looking for him noticed. No body was ever repatriated. No death certificate was ever issued in the name Wesley Grant, which is precisely why the name stayed usable. In 2022, a Venezuelan freelance journalist photographs a man running a small marina on that coast. The photographs are real. The marina is real. The man in them is real, and he is still alive today. He is not Doc. And if you were counting at the end of the last film, 3 dead, 5 in prison, 1 on a coastline nobody can reach, then you were counting out of the same file the government was counting out of. It was wrong. It had been wrong for 6 years. 13 months before the escape, in a visiting room lit like a supermarket, Doc asked his younger sister for help, and she said yes. Sabrina Grant was a paralegal in Newark. She had never had so much as a parking ticket, and over the next year she rented a small house in Erie, Pennsylvania, in the name of a woman who had died in 1989, bought a used sedan under the same name, and built a life for 4 men who did not exist yet. When it collapsed, she took 4.5 years for it, and she served every month. She walked out on a Wednesday afternoon in 2023 into a life that no longer existed. Her brother was gone. Her name was in a court record. She was 47 years old. That is the story you were told, and it is true, and it is not complete. In May of 2022, 14 months before her release, Sabrina Grant sat down with 2 federal prosecutors and a lawyer she did not pay for, and gave a proffer. The last film told you that after she was released, she was followed for 11 days. She was not being followed for 11 days. She was in the car. She sat in a parked vehicle on a residential street with 2 people who were not her friends, and identified a man she had never met, for reasons nobody explained to her. She is not a victim in this story, and she is not a villain yet. She is something the series has not had before. She is a woman who has spent 5 years being the reason other people made decisions. Nobody ever asked her what she wanted. They just kept doing things for her and sending her the bill. There is a man you have already met 3 times. In 2022, a polite young man knocked on the door of a 71-year-old woman named Ruth Pacheco in a kitchen with a kettle on it and asked her about her nephew. She made him tea. He apologized for taking her time. He was there for 11 minutes, and he never once raised his voice, and he never once asked her for anything. After he left, she found a photograph on the kitchen table. It was her grandson, walking through a school gate, taken from across the road. A year later, there is a man sitting on a bench across from a jeweler's shop on a Tuesday afternoon. He is there for 2 hours. He does not go in. And in a surveillance still from the same period, in the background, out of focus, 40 feet behind the person the camera was actually pointed at, there is a young man in a dark jacket, looking directly at the lens. Same man. All 3. His name is Levi Adler. He was 22 years old when he came out of a tunnel in New Jersey and disappeared into a lake. He was 25 when he sat in Ruth Pacheco's kitchen and drank her tea. And for that entire period, according to every federal database that holds his name, he was at the bottom of Lake Champlain. Understand what he did in that kitchen, because it is the whole man in one gesture. He did not threaten a 71-year-old woman. He would never do that. He drank her tea, apologized for the confusion, and left a photograph of a child where she would find it after he had gone. He never said a word about it. He did not have to. 6 years of that. And nobody was chasing him. When the clearing book froze, client 61, 60 other clients lost money. 59 of them decided it was weather. The 60th was out $96,000, and he did not believe in weather. He had been in that pool for 4 years, and he understood exactly what it was. And that is precisely why the number bothered him. Bad luck is messy. It arrives in fractions. This arrived on a Tuesday at 9 in the morning, to the dollar, with a client number attached to it, and a shortfall that was announced before anybody had to ask. Something that tidy is not an accident. It is a decision with the edges filed off. So he did the one thing nobody else in that pool would ever do. He hired an outsider. Sourav Bhatt is 41 years old. He works alone, out of the back bedroom of a house in northwest London, with a notebook, a laptop that takes a long time to start, and a folding umbrella he loses roughly once a month. He is not a former detective. He is not ex-anything. He does insurance work, matrimonial work, and occasionally, for people who cannot go to the police, work like this. He knows who is paying him. He knows what the money is. He takes the job anyway, and the fee is £4,500 plus expenses. On his second day, he calls a bank in Houston and asks a clerk a question that is completely wrong. He apologizes. He asks it again, slightly differently. He apologizes again. 90 seconds later, he hangs up holding a date he was never supposed to have. That is his entire method, and he says it out loud, once, to the man paying him. People will not tell you what they know, but they will always correct you when you are wrong. To understand what happens in the second half of this story, you have to understand a piece of machinery that almost nobody outside it has ever had explained to them. Not a prison, not a courtroom, a filing cabinet. When the federal government runs a confidential human source, that person becomes a number in a drawer. The number is opened by one agent, and that agent is the only human being the source ever deals with. The source is not a witness. He is not a defendant. He is, in the language of the paperwork, an asset. The asset gets tasked. He is given something to find out, and he goes and finds it out, and it comes back through one person. It is written up, dated, filed, and reviewed every 3 months. And at each review, somebody who has never met him writes a single word in a box. And that word is the whole thing, so listen to it carefully. A productive source is an asset, and an asset is protected. Cases are shaped around him. Charges are not brought where they would expose him. People close to him become conditions in an agreement, and those conditions get honored, quietly, for years. An unproductive source is not punished. He is closed. The drawer shuts, the protection ends, and nothing happens to him at all. Nothing is precisely what happens to him. Which means that in this system, the thing keeping a man alive is not loyalty, and it is not gratitude, and it is certainly not the truth. It is a rating. There is a folder going back into a drawer right now in a plain office, and there is a date written on the tab in pen. Hold on to that date. Sourav starts where anyone sensible would start, not with the woman who runs the book, with the people who carry things for her. Client 34 was a man named Mac Vidal. He moved documents and occasionally cash between 3 cities, and he had been doing it for 4 years. In August of 2020, he died in a hotel room in Barranquilla, Colombia. It was not violent, and it was not investigated, and nobody in the pool was told. What interests Surav is not the death. It is the invoice. That hotel room was paid for, in advance, for 11 months after Macvidal stopped being in it. And in the netting pool, his obligation stayed open for 4 years. Position live. Balance carried. Interest accruing against a man in a closed room. When Surav finally forces that door, 4 years of dust later, the fan is still turning, because the room has been paid for and the power was never cut. And he understands why she did it. A dead client cannot object. A dead client cannot withdraw or ask questions or compare notes with anybody. And a book that carries 34 live obligations looks deeper and safer and more expensive to leave than a book that carries 33. She was not hiding a body. She was using one as collateral. 11 days after Surav starts making calls, Marisol Duran, who has carried documents for the book since 2021, drives home on a wet motorway at 11 at night. There are headlights in her mirror for 6 miles. They are still there when she turns off. At 6 the next morning, her car is resting off the road at the bottom of an embankment, with both doors open. Surav did not cause that. Surav has no way of knowing that he did not cause that, and he will carry it for the rest of the film. And now, the piece of paper. You have seen it before. An intake sheet in a quiet office, signed by a man who had $4.5 million in a storage unit and no idea what to do with it. He filled it in himself, in his own handwriting, because he thought it was administration. It was the only genuinely stupid thing he did in 6 years, and it was a confession, and it took 6 years to be read as one. On that sheet there is a line for beneficial parties, not names, a number. How many human beings ultimately have an interest in the money? Surav lays the intake sheet beside the pool's own records and counts. The number on the form is 1 lower than the number of people in the structure. Everybody who ever looked at that discrepancy, and 2 federal analysts did, assumed the same thing. A book that size, 6 years old, 61 clients. Of course, there is an arithmetic error in it. It was logged as a clerical variance and closed. It is not a clerical variance. It is a person. He is not client 61, and he is not client 22, and he is not on the client list at all, because he was inside that book before the financier ever walked through the door. He was there when it was set up. He is the reason it was set up in the shape it was. His name is Levi Adler, and he has been legally at the bottom of a lake in Vermont for 6 years. This is the first time you have seen his face. Look at it, because for 5 films you have been told this man never surfaced. He surfaced on day 21. Wednesday, the 27th of March, 2019. Day 21. A federal building in a city he had no business being in. A counter, a visitor's badge, and a sign-in sheet with 41 names already on it. The 42nd name on that sheet belongs to a dead man. He wrote it himself, in pen, in his own handwriting, while 300 people were dragging a lake for him. And the next morning, somebody who knew exactly where he was signed the paperwork that said the search should continue. He was not hiding from the federal government for 6 years. He was employed by it. The next part is what that bought, who paid for it, and the afternoon in November when the phone stopped being answered.